Welcome to the News Roundup for Thursday, January 8th, 2026. I'm Bill Thomas, and here's what's happening right now. Republican lawmakers now calling for the arrest of Tim Walz after the Minnesota governor threatens to pit his state's National Guard against federal officers. Backlash on Capitol Hill as Congresswoman Ilhan Omar tries to tuck $1 million payday for a Somali charity in her district into a desperately needed government funding bill. Also, President Trump calling for a massive increase in our country's defense spending and warning that it's urgently needed because we're currently living in extremely dangerous times. Also, another red state takes a major step toward redrawing their congressional districts in favor of the GOP. And following weeks of rumors, Hollywood superstar Bradley Cooper finally sets the record straight and reveals whether or not he's actually had plastic surgery. Yeah, inquiring minds want to know. All this and a bunch more coming up right now on the Big Roundup. We have a great deal to get to today, and we begin once again in Minnesota, where an extremely tense standoff between Governor Tim Walz and the Trump administration concerning both immigration and fraud is getting worse by the hour, and sometimes by the minute. A number of Republican lawmakers are now calling for the president to invoke the Insurrection Act and actually place Walz under arrest after the governor gave an order to prepare and potentially deploy his state's National Guard troops in order to protect his citizens from federal agents. That's basically the governor kind of grasping at straws. He's drowning. That's pretty easy to see. In case you're not aware, Walz put his state's troops on high alert following the tragic shooting of a 37-year-old mother of three by ICE agents in Minneapolis, and that happened on Wednesday. Now, the lawmakers argue that by threatening to pit the Minnesota National Guard against federal officers, Walz is essentially guilty of obstructing the U.S. government's law enforcement efforts, and therefore, according to our nation's Constitution, he should be immediately placed behind bars. In the meantime, Walz is also under extreme duress on Capitol Hill, where whistleblowers from Minnesota, they're now testifying before the House Oversight Committee regarding their fruitless attempts to warn the governor and his cronies about the widespread welfare fraud which is plaguing their state. Under oath, those whistleblowers now say that every time they tried to alert Walz to what was going on right under his nose, the governor instead would bite their head off and retaliate against them by threatening to take away their jobs, allowing the crimes to just go on and on. It's pretty much the perfect crime. For his part, as the Department of Homeland Security continues to expand their operations in Minneapolis, a determined and furious Walz is ratcheting up the rhetoric and saying he will not allow his community to be used as a prop in a national political dogfight. He also says that right now the FBI is intentionally blocking state agencies from getting their hands on critical evidence regarding the recent ICE shooting, making it virtually impossible for his team to arrive at a fair outcome. Furthermore, he's calling the Trump administration a bunch of liars, going so far as to accuse Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem of being judge, jury, and executioner, all wrapped up into one. Well, look, not even remotely accurate. But even if it was, she's not the one responsible for the $9 billion worth of fraud. Good try, though. But next time, kind of stay on the trail. Final thoughts, and this is the News Roundup Lowdown, and here is the bottom line. This Governor Tim Walz fella, considered by tons of people to be tragically incompetent and brutally corrupt. Also, I don't like those beady eyes, and I think he's been putting on a little bit of weight as well. But I won't mention that, on account of it probably wouldn't be polite. This money genius runs a state which is being investigated for a monumental amount of fraud to the tune of $9 billion and perhaps even more. His state is overrun with fraud, crime, illegal immigration, and a bunch of other junk. And as we all know, ICE officials, they're in town performing the job which they've been tasked with. Now, while yesterday's deadly shooting involving an ICE officer and a local woman is in fact a great tragedy, assigning guilt to anybody this early in the investigation, that'll benefit absolutely no one at all. ICE officers, they're in Minnesota with a job to do. And for the soon-to-be ex-governor, the soon-to-be former governor, to issue warnings to the federal government, it's dangerous. It's more than dangerous. It's dumb. And if Tim Walz is attempting to start a war between Guard troops and the federal government, that's a war he'll tragically lose real quick and in grand style. Governor Tim Walz, he's in over his head, and left to his devices, he'll do everything possible to dismantle and destroy the once fine state of Minnesota. Now, a heartfelt note to 47. Mr. President, it is the opinion of your News Roundup crew that Tim Walz immediately be removed from office, put in cuffs, thrown behind bars. And because we don't want him to be lonely, we'll make sure he gets to watch the News Roundup each and every night from the clink before going to bed, before turning in. Hiya, Tim. Thanks for tuning in. I return now to Capitol Hill, where a number of critical funding bills designed to keep our federal government afloat, they're being held up in part thanks to the efforts of the one and only Representative Ilhan Omar. I call her my little bucket of sunshine. My little bucket of something. Yeah, I'm pretty sure it's sunshine. Now, according to reports, the Congresswoman from Minnesota trying to squeeze more than 1 million clams in funding for a Somali-led community project into the package, resulting in significant backlash from the GOP and forcing lawmakers to reconfigure the measure. Well, so you know, Omar is hoping to get her hands on federal funding to support an organization in her district called Generation Hope, which provides people in the Somali community with access to substance abuse, mental health, and job training assistance. And I'm sure they're on the up and up and well deserving of the dough. Meanwhile, angry conservatives are now drawing a firm line in the sand, saying they've had enough of these types of traditional earmark add-ons, which add billions of dollars to spending bills in order to appease politicians on both sides of the aisle. However, they say they're extremely bothered by Congresswoman Omar's earmark, pointing out that nobody in America wants to see their money going toward these types of projects. Correct? As a result, in order to move the package forward, lawmakers are now hard at work and eliminating as many of these types of add-ons as they can, including Omar's. They also say that for the sake of ease, they're now splitting the measure into 3 separate bills, which, in a nutshell, provide funding for many of our nation's key energy, interior, and scientific agencies. In the meantime, in a related note, the Trump administration has just announced they're suspending all federal assistance to the government of Somalia until further notice. Kind of a head-scratcher. Can't imagine why. They accuse officials there of seizing a massive amount of donor-funded food aid, which was provided to help out needy Somali citizens, and destroying the warehouse it was stored in, adding that they have a zero-tolerance policy when it comes to fraud, waste, and theft. Final thoughts, and this is the News Roundup Lowdown. You know, this Ilhan Omar gal, she just doesn't get it. It sounds like she's still pushing for more dough for a bunch of insiders. Miss Omar is the Congress gal in charge of Minnesota's 5th District, and that's the one which has fallen victim to tons and tons of fraud. $250 million by some estimates. You know, on her watch, a lot of folks got rich. Dozens were arrested, convicted too, and a bunch of those cons are in prison cells, while more investigations, they're still going on. Now, here's the real kick in the head. She still has a job, claims she did nothing wrong, and she's trying to score an extra wad of dough from the federal government to help out what sounds like one of her special interest pet projects. You know, by now, you and I both know about this woman, more about her than you ever wanted to know, her shenanigans as well. Also, as taxpayers, I think we've all been gypped, and on her watch. And here's the deal. You know, anybody with a conscience and a pulse, even a shallow pulse, would do a far better job of overseeing her district in Minnesota, and she has absolutely got to go. Now, because I have a heart and I don't want her to be out of a gig, we all need a job. I'm going to personally recommend her for a job working with a traveling circus anywhere in the USA. One minor caveat, though. In the interest of financial prudence, best not to put her in charge of the cash register. Don't make her one of those cash register carnies, on account of she's not real good with money and accountability, and, well, you know the story. All right, switch things up just a bit now. Shift our focus to a stern warning from President Trump and an urgent plea for a massive increase to our nation's defense budget. You got to be prepared for everything. In an alarming development, 47 now calling for Congress to quickly approve a humongous spike in defense spending, saying that the huge buildup is necessary because we're living in what he calls troubled and dangerous times. The commander-in-chief says that beginning with the next fiscal year, he wants our country's military spending to be at least $1.5 trillion. Now, by comparison, this year's defense budget, it's a paltry $900 billion. Now, Trump says that 67% spending bump, that'll allow us to forge a dream military that's capable of keeping our nation safe and secure from any foe that dares to challenge us. Additionally, he says that the tremendous financial success of his current tariff policy, it's going to allow our country to easily pick up the tab for what he claims it's going to be an unparalleled military force, the likes of which the planet has never seen before. You got to stay strong. Among the expensive projects which would likely benefit from the enormous spike, Trump's Golden Dome missile defense system, as well as the president's golden fleet of Trump-class battleships. You got to like that. At the same time, the president also sending a direct warning to all U.S. defense contractors and weapons manufacturers as well. He says that if they want to continue doing business with the federal government, they all need to up their infrastructure investments and decrease the outrageous payouts they're giving to their top executives. Final thought, and this is the News Roundup Lowdown. You know, this is where we kind of stop down for the comparison-contrast portion of the big Roundup. Now, look, during his time in office, while he was pretending to be the president of the United States, Joe Biden said time and time again, in between his naps, that the world is dangling on the precipice of World War III. And if I recall correctly, to address the pending end of the world, Mr. Biden would always share some very cogent thoughts with his fellow citizens like you and I. Here's a little bit of what he articulated. He would say things like, "I'm not kidding," and "here's the deal," and "not a joke," "I'm serious," and his big one, "it's a bunch of malarkey." In fact, Editor Pranov might even have a clip or two of Mr. Biden. Pranov?
Not a joke. I'm serious. Heads of state. I'm not a joke. I'm not joking. No, I mean it. I'm serious. No, I'm not. You think I'm joking? I really mean it. I'm not joking. That's a bunch of malarkey.
That's a fine way to handle World War III. Oh, yeah, and great job on the border as well, Mr. Biden. Today, there's a new sheriff in town, and while the last one carried a BB gun, this one carries a bazooka, more powerful than Clint Eastwood's Magnum, 44 Magnum. Now, President Trump, he realizes just how precarious the world is right now, with threats coming at us from every imaginable angle. You got China, Russia, North Korea, Iran. Well, just kidding about Iran. Just kidding a little bit. We already obliterated their nuclear infrastructure some time back. Hey, if the chief says extra funds are required to ensure a world-class military, then every nickel he's asking for, it's got to be granted. Pony up the dough and don't be cheap. Now, it's perfectly understandable that the Democrats are going to object. After all, if you spend all that bread on national defense, there'll be less to flush down the drain in Minnesota's fabulous casino playing that world-class game. Pranov the Magnificent, if you would please. Wheel of Corruption. I just adore that game. A few people win, and millions of tax-paying Americans suffer billions and billions in losses. Oh yeah, the House. They always win. World-class military or more fraud? Your choice, and I hope you choose wisely. Pivoting now to what I think is a shocking development concerning the recent infiltration of our federal government by the Chinese Communist Party and their direct threat to our national security. According to new reports, a sophisticated Chinese hacking group known as Salt Typhoon, I've heard of those guys, they've just breached the email systems used by a number of high-level congressional committees, giving them access to a variety of critical and sensitive communications. I've always said Congress needs to use Earthlink email. That's what I use, and it's very secure, but it's expensive. It's about $9 a month for the service. The report says that hackers were able to penetrate the correspondence of House committees dealing with foreign affairs, armed services, intelligence, and a bunch more. They also say the breach potentially gave the communist regime an open window into our country's policies concerning military strategy, counter-espionage, and our relationship with China itself. I think somebody on our team has been asleep at the wheel. It can't be that difficult to secure email systems. Of course, Chinese officials claim they knew nothing about it at all. However, for years now, the Salt Typhoon has been linked directly to the CCP, and security experts say this latest dramatic escalation in cyber warfare could eventually result in a treasure trove of critical information for the Chinese regime. Yeah, we know what you guys are up to, and we're on to you. Now, some additional headlines we are keeping a very close watch on here in the News Roundup newsroom. And first up, Vice President J.D. Vance defending the Trump administration's actions in Minnesota, saying the tragic ICE shooting is the inevitable result of the far-left lunatic fringe and that the gaslighting is off the charts when it comes to the public's appraisal of the situation. Meantime, a number of Democratic lawmakers now calling for ICE to be defunded, as well as suggesting that it's time for Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem to be impeached. Right. Don't impeach Governor Walz, impeach Kristi Noem. America, you can't make this stuff up. Moving along, Governor Ron DeSantis now says that in just a few months from right now, planning to call a special session of the Florida legislature, ask them to redraw his state's congressional maps with an eye on adding a number of extra Republican seats ahead of this year's midterm elections. And don't be fooled, they're coming up real quick. Also, in a surprising turn of events, Democratic Senator John Fetterman of Pennsylvania now says he supports President Trump's goal of adding Greenland to the U.S. roster in the name of national security, adding that he doesn't support taking the strategic island by force and would prefer to buy it instead. And I agree. I say you offer Greenland $50,000 and a gently used Buick. That's pretty fair. I think we paid more than that or less than that for Manhattan. And now a quick gander at a bit of showbiz news, and we'll kick things off today with a Hollywood heartthrob who's now setting the record straight concerning his impeccable appearance. And once and for all, superstar Bradley Cooper, he is now shutting the door on all the public chatter and revealing that, contrary to popular belief, he's never had an ounce of plastic surgery in his entire life. Adding that, in the end, he just simply looks good. And give him this, he's pretty humble as well. Well, now we know the lovely and talented Bradley Cooper, he did not go under the knife, and he's just naturally that pretty. It happens. Also, and most folks don't know this, but News Roundup editor Pranav, we call him Pranav the Magnificent, is Bradley Cooper's doppelganger. They could actually be twin brothers. In fact, put up a picture of Bradley Cooper, and please, America, take a good long look at that handsome face. Now, pull that one down and put up a picture of Pranav. You can see what I'm saying. And now if you could bring that down, let's do a side-by-side, both Pranav and Bradley Cooper. And look, there's absolutely no way to tell the difference. It's just amazing. And speaking of good-looking actors, 55-year-old Matt Damon now reveals that he recently adopted a gluten-free diet to help him drop dozens of pounds and sculpt a chiseled physique, just like this one. That's for his leading role in director Christopher Nolan's upcoming Odyssey epic. The Good Will Hunting star also says that thanks to his strict training regimen, back at his old high school weight, and that moving forward, he plans to stay the course and skip gluten for the foreseeable future. Hey, Matt Damon, we're all big fans. You're looking great, but before you put all that work in, lose all the weight, chisel the abs, and all the rest. Look, man, it's the 21st century. It's perfectly acceptable to cheat. Keep the weight on. Have pizza and root beer for breakfast, and make the movie guys use all their special effects, prosthetics, and all the other movie magic. I say always take the easy way out. In life, I always say anything worth working for, it's really not worth working for. You always got to take the easy way out. Also in Los Angeles, two-time Academy Award winner Jodie Foster now admits she's still obsessed with her most famous performance after all these years. Yeah, the 63-year-old actress says she still thinks about her role as FBI agent Clarice Starling in The Silence of the Lambs all the time, and that she can't help wondering where her character would be today, decades after she first hit the silver screen. You know, over the course of a bunch of decades, Jodie Foster, she's done pretty much everything. And everything she does, in my mind, absolutely unbeatable. The best at what she does. The best thing she ever did all those years ago, Silence of the Lambs. But the worst thing she did was excuse herself from Hannibal. The sequel came out about a quarter of a century ago. And editor's choice. Editor Pranav, show us some love. Give us some of that silence, and what do you got?
I mean, you got like a description, fingerprints, anything like that?
Best movie of all time. Well, that or Anchorman with Will Ferrell. And they're both very similar. And now it is time for us to call it a wrap on the big news roundup. So have an awesome day today. Stay safe. And if you haven't done so already, it's right there. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button. And with that, we're going to dim the lights, call it a day, fade to black, and we'll see you right back here tomorrow. It'll be another edition, a brand new episode of the Big News Roundup.